Hey guys, just putting a quick simple installation video together for this fuel manager pre-filter kit. It's for the Isuzu D-Max 4JJ3 and the Mazda BT-50. So yeah, we're just going to go and put this together now. Lots of quick and easy install steps here. Number one, locate the install area. So the install area is on your passenger side, right behind your battery here. I've just whacked it in, nice and easy. It picks up on these existing bolt stubs that are coming through here. They come with all this hardware. You put your flat washer, your spring washer, and your nut, and that'll just be a 10mm spanner that you'll probably whack in there. So you can use a socket, but you might need a spanner to get into this one, a bit less room. And then down the bottom there's a slot, and there's already an existing thread there, and you use one of the M8 bolts, which is a 13mm socket with a bit of an extension to reach up there, make it nice and easy. They come with just enough to do these two, so you've got two of each for both all this hardware, and there's actually 3 of the M8 bolts with the washers, 1 for the bottom, and then 2 to mount up to the top here for your assembly. Alright, number 2, attach the fittings to the fuel manager unit. It says use the thread sealant as well that it comes with. So I give you this tube here of thread sealant to use on your pipe fittings so they don't leak. So 2 brass end blocks into ports 3 and 4. So these are your end blocks here. It's because we're not using those ports at all. And 3 and 4, you'll see the numbers on the side here. That's 3 and 4 there. The reason behind you blocking 3 and 4 is obviously that side is facing the motor. We're not using that side. We're actually coming out this side. So they're just auxiliary ports, so they're not needed. So we're just going to block them off. Just put the thread sealant on these bungs that are going to go into 3 and 4. Just make sure you cover about half of it. So after you put the thread sealant on these brass fittings, just wind them in by hand first. Always start as much as you can by hand. Wind them in as far as they'll go. Pretty sure they're a 9/16 imperial thread, but you could use a good old-fashioned shifter to tighten them up. But if you've got a 9/16 single hex socket or double hex socket, whatever's easiest, if you've got it handy to whack that on. So I just use the shifter, just tighten them up. As you see, they don't go all the way in, so don't try and force them. The thread sealant will tighten them all up. That's just as far as they go. So they're all blocked off. Now the 2 straight brass fittings into ports 1 and 2. So we're just going to go into the opposite side and go 1 and 2 and put our 2 straight fittings in there with the thread sealant on them as well. So these are the 2 straight fittings that they're talking about. Okay, so again, the thread sealant's on. As a minimum, I'd do the first 3 or 4 thread grooves. Make sure it comes up most of the way. As you wind it in, it will actually work up further. But I'd just do minimum the first 3 or 4 grooves, just like that. Make sure they're fully covered all the way around. Screw them in by hand, as far as they'll go. Okay, nice and easy. Once you put one in, to tighten it up, so then you're not leaving any loose and not forgetting about them. With this side, you can either use a deep socket that can go over the top with 9/16 if it's hollow enough in the center. If not, just whack your shifter on there or a spanner, 9/16. So tighten them ones up and whack the next one in and then do the same to that. Okay, they're all nice and tight, and as you see, they don't go all the way in, so don't go forcing them too hard. Just do them up till they get firm. Thread sealant will activate and we'll seal it up nice and good. Okay, number 3, mount the stainless steel bracket in the inner left front of engine bay. We already done that step when we opened the box. That's the stainless steel bracket that it's talking about, so we just put that in first and got it out of the way, got rid of some of the parts. So that's referring to this step, making sure it's all mounted in, all nice and tight. It's in that front left section there. Okay, so number 4, mount the fuel manager to the bracket. And it also mentions here to pre-fill the fuel manager, the unit, with clean diesel. So we're going to have to open this one up and just put a bit of diesel in there to fill him up, so it doesn't have to prime with it empty. So we'll just open this one up now. So they come with this nifty tool to be able to open it up. You can just use your hands. You can grip onto here and just turn it back and hold the top part, or you can use the little nifty tool that they give you. Just slides and locates on the grooves like that, feed it up from the bottom, so we'll see how that goes. So all I did was just rotate it anti-clockwise, and as you can see, it just comes off with a quarter of a turn, if that. Once that's disconnected, you can just lift up on the top and it'll pop out, just like that. There we go. And what we want to do is we just want to prime this one and just fill this up as close to the top with diesel. Okay, once you've filled it up with diesel, you'll get a little bit of diesel around the top. Give it a nice little wipe just to lubricate that seal before you tighten it back up. So just a bit of diesel is fine for that. So you've got a bit on there, give it a wipe. Once you've primed it all, push the top back in and then tighten up your clip again. There you go, all clicked back together, all nice and lined up, and it's all primed, it's got diesel inside. Now to mount it to the stainless steel bracket, we just use our 2 bolts and our 2 flat washers here. Righto, that's all in position, all tightened up. So these M8 bolts are the same as the bottom one down there. They're 13mm, so tighten them up with your 13mm. Make sure it's all nice and solid, it's not going anywhere. Okay, righto, we're up to number 5. Remove the front filter guard from the factory filter housing. Okay, so just up behind the battery now is where our fuel filter is. So this is the guard here that they're talking about, the front filter guard. So we're just going to remove this one. When you look over the top here, you'll see a couple of nuts and some bolts down there. So onto mount stubs. Alright, just to mix it up a bit, this one's a 12mm, so it's not a 13 like the last one. So you've got a 12mm socket extension. You can get down here and get to these ones, no worries at all. Okay, so the good thing about this bracket is it's got slots in it, so you don't have to take the nuts off, you just loosen off enough, and then you can actually pull the bracket out backwards, and then you can lift it up. So you don't have to actually worry about taking them nuts off completely. I had actually run a bit of conduit behind it, so I had to just pop the lid off my fuse box, just to give a bit of extra clearance, and I just lifted up that conduit. Okay, the fuel filter bracket's off, so that's number 5. We've got to identify the fuel feed line, the feeding line to the fuel filter. Remove the guard. We've done that. We've got to disconnect this line here, so it's obviously highlighted, and identify it. And then we're going to go into the next section. Once we've identified it, remove it from the factory filter. We're going to cut off 75mm, 3 inches roughly from the end, and save it for later use. So while we're at this stage here of disconnecting the fuel lines and putting this hose on, we've actually got a new filter as well. So we're going to whack a new fuel filter in. That's the part number. And we'll do this at exactly the same time. So with the fuel filter assembly here, you just disconnect this top plug, push down on the little tab, pop that off. You pretty much just grab onto it and give it a pull and lift it up. So if you have 2 hands on it, you give it a wiggle and you sort of pull it up, and that'll get it out of the bracket. At the back here, you can see it just slides in, those grooves there, just slide in there. When you're putting it back in, same thing, pop it in and push it down. So with disconnecting the fuel line and cutting it off from the fuel feed line, the fuel feed line is the one at the front here. So there's two hoses that go. The fuel feed line, there's a hose that goes down here. This is the one we're going to remove. That's the one it's talking about. The photo does show the hose underneath it, and it actually goes around the back here, and that's the 2 hoses that they're talking about at the back that they show in their photo. So it's obviously lines up to that front one there. There's 2 hose clamps, the front one towards the front of the vehicle is this front one here. So that's the one we're disconnecting, and we're going to cut off the 75mm from the end. Just back to doing the fuel filter at the same time too. We just twist this little locking ring anti-clockwise. Give us a bit more room while we're in there. We take this cap off, pop that off. Just a pair of pliers on the hose clamp, squeeze it together, give it a little wiggle, and then push that clamp down, and you should be able to wiggle the hose off. So there's the hose off there, off the fitting. The other thing you can do to give yourself a little bit more room is push this clip down with the flat blade, and you can take that clip off. And we might even just take that back hose off and pull this whole housing out just to make it a bit easier. You could mark it with a paint pen or a bit of tape or something so you know which is which, but it's pretty self-explanatory. The one at the back goes to the back, the one at the front goes to the front. Once you've popped both your hoses off, if you want to do it this way and change your filter, there's a little clip down here. Whereabouts is it? This one down here. Just got to pop that out, there'll be a little push type, and then pull it out. And there, that's that clip there, it's just for the sender unit. And there you get the whole housing out, make it a bit easier to be able to change the fuel filter. Once you've undone that ring there, they are a bit tight, but if you just sort of wiggle it sort of backwards and forwards, and just be careful of all the fittings, and it ends up just popping up. So there you just slide your filter out. You can see it's definitely needed, starting to get a build up of stuff on there. So yeah, it comes the filter. And here's our comparison with our new Ryco filter. We'll whack this sucker in. So doing the fuel filter, you've got a seal up on top here of the old one, and you've got a seal that's around the top ring of the housing here. So we've got another one, so we're going to pop this one out and replace that, and then we've got a new one on the new fuel filter up here as well, and then you've got one in here as well, which comes in here. So first we're going to do is pop this one out. You can just grab it out with your fingers or pop a screwdriver in there. Just peel him out, give it a clean in there. Once it's all clean, pop the new one back in. Again with the rubber seal, bit of clean diesel, rub it around just for a lubricant when you put it back together. And the new filter has the new seals on it, new seal here, new seal here. So we can pop him in, back in here. Just remember with these seals too, they're rubber as well, so a little bit of clean diesel just over them when you're reinstalling it. It's always good if you do have a jerry can or some diesel around to fill your filter housing. First you can prime it, if not you can turn the ignition and cycle it a few times and it'll prime it up. You've also got this handy hand pump primer too that goes on the top of the housing, so you just push that down with the palm of your hand once it's all connected, and that'll actually prime it through. So we'll go through that shortly, but for now we've got the filter in, we've lubricated the seals, we're just going to put the top back on. Okay, when you're putting the top on, just make sure you push it all the way down by hand first, and then you do your lock ring up. So make sure it's all the way down and even surface all the way around touching, and then you put your lock ring on. So it's back together now. That's all it takes to do the fuel filter, not much involved in that, but we'll go back and we'll modify our hose now. So that's all joined up now, we've got our hose clamps on nice and tight. So the fuel will come up from the tank, it'll go through the joiner, it'll go through our hose. We've just tucked it in behind here, and then we'll trim the hose now to suit to the port 2. So we'll just pop it back out of this conduit, and we'll trim it and put a hose clamp on here, so it'll go into our fuel manager, and then it'll come back out of our fuel manager and it'll go back. So we've cut off the excess hose now, so we've got the hose and our conduit there. We've made it, cut it just to length, and we've just allowed a little bit extra so we can tuck it back in here, and then when we do go to change the filter in here, it's just a matter of we can undo the top 2 bolts and the bottom one, and we can be able to have enough room in that hose to be able to lift it out. Okay, that's number 7 done. You know, we've ran it from our joiner, we've tucked it in around the back here, we've got our conduit already on, so we don't have to worry about coming back and do it later. It's trimmed to length, and we've got a little bit of extra just down in here, so you can when you remove the filter, it's a bit more wiggle room. So that's number 7 done. Number 8, using the fuel feed line, the offset. Okay, it's the bit that we cut off. Insert the 12mm brass 90 degree elbow, secure with hose clamp. Okay, let's do that. So here's our little offcut, here's our little 90 degree barb, and here's our hose clamp. And here we go, all done. Got our barb in there, got our hose clamp on nice and tight, and we've got our other fitting to go back on. Okay, now that that's done, we're up to the next one here. Attach the factory inlet, secure with clamp. So remember our inlet one, fuel in was to the front, so this one here. So we can put our fitting on now while we've got it out, or if it's in the car you can put it back on. Okay, so it goes back on like that, back onto our fuel inlet. Okay, we're up to 9A. Now we've got to run the return hose back from the fuel manager, from the port 1, so the other one that's empty and doesn't have the hose on it, this one here. We're going to run it all the way back to this one here, so we just use that, and then we'll just trim it to suit. So what we'll do is, because we've got the fuel filter out, the housing out, because we've done the fuel filter as well, we'll run the hose through and then we'll put it in and mount it up in there. Okay, so we've run that return hose through, we've just gone in behind here, behind the washer bottle, up here, and we've got the excess poking out here. What we're going to do is we're going to hook this end all up first, because it's a bit harder to get to than this end here, up this end. So we'll hook all that end up, and then we'll trim this at the end once we've got our final measurement. Okay, we've hooked our fuel feed offcut up to our elbow, back to the return line coming from the port 2 that we've just put the hose through. So we've hooked that up nice and tight, and then we're just going to hook this the other line, the existing one that we haven't touched, on the back up to here, and then we'll place the housing back into position. We also got to remember to hook our line up to the bottom if you've had this out, plug that back in, and then we've got our plug on top that still needs to go back on as well. Alright, we've got our clip back on, we've got our fuel line hooked up, we've got the back one on, and we've got our sender underneath plugged in, and we've just clipped it back into that bracket. So now we can install our guard at the front here, and then finish up this end here. Yeah, there we go. So just prime the system on the last one here, prime the system using the button on the factory fuel filter. Just pretty much pump it until it starts to get firm. So that's your button up the top here. So you just put your palm on it, and you just push down and you'll feel it until it starts to pump all the fuel up, and then you'll feel it change in state. It'll start to get a bit firm. It means you've primed all the fuel through. You've primed your fuel from your fuel manager all the way up to your fuel filter, and then you can start it. It does mention here that if your car does stop, obviously it doesn't have enough fuel, it might have an airlock in it or something, so just get onto it, prime it up again, and then give it another crack until you get it. Once you've got it all sorted, start your car, make sure it's all good, and just check for leaks everywhere. And once it's all done, you can make sure you put your bracket back in here too. I'm leaving mine out, but it's up to you what you want to do, whether you want to put it back in or not, that fuel cover. So yeah, there you go. Nice little install for you guys.